Maverick News presents The Rick Walker Show. Defrag your mind.
Good evening, Maverick family. I'm Rick Walker. Welcome back to the Maverick News Channel, and hello to all new viewers from all over the globe. Glad to have you with us tonight. Some interesting stories to share with you. In fact, the show is kind of stacked. We have a preview of sorts for the upcoming NATO summit. Joe Biden has said that Ukraine is not ready for NATO membership. So some cracks might be showing in the unity of the NATO alliance. Also, a story has popped up again regarding the online presence for Antifa. It seems all roads lead to the White House. We'll explain this evening. And Larry Nassar, a notorious child sex offender and athletic coach, stabbed 7 times in prison. We'll talk about that tonight as well. And now we're getting confirmation that Vladimir Putin did meet with Yevgeny Prigozhin after, well, just days after whatever that thing was that happened over in Russia with Wagner forces heading toward Moscow. Some say it was an attempted coup. Others say it's some sort of a psyop. We don't really know. But we do know now that Prigozhin, the head, the leader, the owner of Wagner, did meet with Vladimir Putin. So we'll take a look at that story as well. So all that and a whole lot more coming up right here on the Maverick News Channel. Do not go away. I will be right back.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
And I am back, as promised. So, breaking news from the NATO summit in Vilnius, Lithuania tonight. A major development. Turkey has dropped its opposition to Sweden's bid to join NATO. This announcement comes on the eve of the alliance's 74th annual summit and has been met with applause from President Joe Biden. The decision follows a conversation between President Biden and Turkish President Erdogan regarding U.S. F-16s for Ankara, although any direct connection between the two events remains unclear. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg announced today that an agreement has been reached between him, President Erdogan, and Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson. Stoltenberg hailed this as a historic step that will strengthen NATO allies. President Biden, who has been vocal in supporting Sweden's membership, wasted no time in celebrating this breakthrough. In a statement, he said, I welcome the statement issued by Turkey, Sweden, and the NATO Secretary General, including the commitment by President Erdogan to transmit the accession protocol for Sweden to Turkey's Grand National Assembly for swift ratification. So, President Biden expressed his readiness to work with President Erdogan and Turkey to enhance defense and deterrence in the Euro-Atlantic area. He also extended a warm welcome to Prime Minister Kristersson of Sweden as the 32nd NATO ally, while expressing gratitude to Secretary General Stoltenberg for his steadfast leadership. According to a press statement from NATO, Erdogan has agreed to promptly send Sweden's accession protocol to Parliament in exchange for new commitments on terrorism and economic cooperation. This includes the establishment of a special coordinator for counterterrorism within NATO. So it's worth noting here that Sweden's bid had faced opposition from Hungary. However, Stoltenberg confirmed that Hungary has indicated it will not be the last to ratify Sweden's application, and he believes that the problem will be resolved. President Biden had been actively advocating for Sweden's membership. In a meeting with Prime Minister Kristersson last week, he expressed full support for Sweden's NATO membership, emphasizing that it will strengthen the alliance and share the same values. The White House revealed that President Biden also discussed Sweden's bid with President Erdogan during a call Sunday. So while the delivery of those American F-16 fighter jets to Turkey was discussed during the call, White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan did not provide a direct answer when asked if it was a quid pro quo for Turkey allowing Sweden to join NATO. Sullivan stated that President Biden believes both actions are in the best interest of the alliance and the U.S.-Turkey bilateral relationship. Now, President Biden arrived in Lithuania today following his visit to London, where he met with UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and King Charles III. It's the first time he's met King Charles since King Charles took the crown. He is scheduled to meet with President Erdogan tomorrow in the morning in Vilnius. The NATO summit will focus on providing continued aid to Ukraine as it launches its counteroffensive, which even tonight the mainstream media is admitting, kind of maybe inadvertently, but I've heard a few reports tonight where the journalists have referred to the counteroffensive as the stalled counteroffensive against Russia. So all that's going on, plus in an interview with CNN, and this is maybe even more significant, Biden, in an interview with CNN, indicated just over the last 48 hours that, in his view, Ukraine is not ready to join NATO. Now, we'll play this little clip, and then I'll comment on it, and we'll also tell you what Trudeau is doing over in Vilnius. So here's the clip of Biden on CNN.
Mr. President, an honor to have you on the program.
Good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
When you go to the NATO summit, the big strategic issue is that Ukraine wants membership in NATO. Should it get membership in NATO?
I don't think it's ready for membership in NATO, but here's the deal. I spent, as you know, a great deal of time trying to hold NATO together because I believe Putin has had an overwhelming objective from the time he launched 185,000 troops in Ukraine. And that was to break NATO. He was confident, in my view, and many of the intelligence community, he was confident he could break NATO. So holding NATO together is really critical. I don't think there is unanimity in NATO about whether or not to bring Ukraine into the NATO family now, at this moment, in the middle of a war. For example, if you did that, then, I mean what I say, we're determined to commit every inch of territory that is NATO territory. It's a commitment that we've all made no matter what. If the war is going on, then we're all in the war. We're in war with Russia if that were the case. So I think we have to lay out a path for the rational path for for Ukraine to be able to qualify to get into NATO. And we have, when the very first time I met with Putin 2 years ago in Geneva, and he said, I want commitments on no Ukraine in NATO. I said, we're not going to do that because it's an open door policy. We're not going to shut anybody out. NATO is a process that takes some time to meet all the qualifications, and from democratization to a whole range of other issues. So in the meantime, though, I've spoken with Zelensky at length about this. And one of the things I indicated is the United States would be ready to provide, while the process was going on, and it's going to take a while that process is going on, to provide security a la the security we provide for Israel, providing the weaponry, the capacity to defend themselves if there is an agreement, if there is a ceasefire, if there is a peace agreement. And so I think we can work it out, but I think it's premature to call for a vote, in now, because there's other qualifications that need to be met, including democratization and some of those issues.
In a way, it makes me feel a little bit better. In another way, I'm still on pins and needles because I don't think you can just take what's being said there at face value. This is me editorializing a little bit. That's almost rational, which is a very unusual thing for Joe Biden. To bring Ukraine into NATO right now seems insane. And that's what Zelensky has been pushing for. Remember that? I hate to say video, but that's what it was. It was a staged signing ceremony where he came out into a courtyard and they had a table set up with the document where he was trying to expedite the inclusion of Ukraine into NATO membership, and he signed this thing with somebody else. It was kind of a bizarre, cheap-looking thing. It was done hastily, but he's been pushing hard all along to get NATO membership, knowing that if that's the case, NATO then, inevitably becomes directly involved in the war with Russia, directly involved. I mean, there is the policy, right? An attack against one NATO member is an attack against all. And right now, Ukraine has been described essentially as a de facto NATO member anyway. It's just a formality to have everything signed. So this is almost rational thinking to just, on Biden's part, to put the brakes on. But I'm not so sure that that's going to happen. I don't know. I just don't trust this. And I don't trust him at this point, because this might just be a PR exercise where he is saying this so that he doesn't look like the guy who is pushing, or who pushes the button or signs the document, or doesn't want to take the lead essentially on this issue to have Ukraine join NATO. Other NATO member countries, we'll see what happens during the summit, which begins tomorrow in Vilnius, Lithuania. I don't know. There's something doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right. Too rational after all the irrationality that we've seen through all of this since the beginning of this conflict, all going back to 2014 and even before, going back to the fall of the Berlin Wall and the expansion of NATO. Since then, something doesn't smell right. What it also could be, though, is an indicator that the counteroffensive, which I've already indicated, is being described by even some mainstream media journalists tonight as the stalled counteroffensive, it shows that it's not going as well as NATO and the United States were probably hoping. Why would you bring Ukraine into the NATO fold when you're losing the war? Well, I guess you could say that you would want to ramp it up, but it says to me that if Ukraine was on the verge of victory, it would be really easy for Biden to sit there and say, yeah, we'll let them join the war. You know, they've got this under control. We'll be rolling into Moscow next week. So there's very little risk politically for him at that point. And don't forget that the election is really not that far off. He needs to go into that election looking good on the Ukraine war front, on that portfolio. He doesn't want a long, protracted, bloody war on his hands with U.S. soldiers on the ground in there getting killed. I think that would not go well for him in the next election. Not good for the Democrats either. I don't know. Hard for me to say. I think that if this thing continues, if this conflict continues in the way that it is, it's inevitable that we will end up with NATO troops in there, U.S., Canadian, British, German troops in, and others, in Ukraine, fighting this war. I just don't know about the timing. And I think that they would prefer to have the Russians pushed back and on their heels before sending in their troops, or they're going to have to do it because they're on the verge of losing. It's going to be one extreme or the other, I think. Nothing in the middle. But one way or another, I think it's almost inevitable if the war continues. If they finally come to their senses and agree to some sort of a peace agreement, or finally go back to the table, and the Russians have, repeatedly tried to achieve peace. We saw when the African leaders visited Putin that he pulled out that document, that draft for that peace agreement, and he showed it to them, and it was all initialed and it was ready to go. But then they sent Boris Johnson over there to cut it off at the knees and end that. They couldn't have peace. No. That war had to continue on. So this is just weird. It just doesn't feel right. But it is, on the day before the NATO summit begins officially, and we're getting a little bit of a preview of what we can expect to see during the summit itself. And Justin Trudeau is over there today as well, and met with Lithuania's top politician. We have that queued up for you here, and we'll let that roll now. Here's Prime Minister Trudeau and the Prime Minister of Lithuania in Vilnius.
Atvykus į Vilnių su mums ypač svarbia dvišalė naujiena. Šiame susitikime ministras pirmininkas pranešė apie atidaromą ar jau veikiančią nuo šiandien ambasadą, Kanados ambasadą Vilniuje. Ir tikrai labai džiaugiamės šituo Kanados vyriausybės sprendimu. Esu tikra.
We are really glad about this decision by the Canadian government. I'm sure that this presence of the embassy will allow us to strengthen our ties between our states and expand our bilateral agenda. Canada is a close partner of Lithuania, and the basis of our friendship are the same values that join us: freedom, democracy, and the rule of law principle, respect for human rights, and mutual responsibility for the rules-based international order. We are very grateful to Canada that it has never approved the Lithuanian annexation. This was very important for the people of our country who lived under the occupation. This Canadian stance only proves how important is a value-based foreign policy foundation that joins our nations today. I'm glad about our bilateral cooperation in the area of economy. We still have room to improve, especially when it comes to higher value goods or services, or expanding startups ecosystems. During the meeting, I thanked the Prime Minister and Canada for their contribution in strengthening the security of the Baltic region, the command of the EFP in Latvia, and their troops' presence in the unit in Vilnius. I also congratulated the Canadian plans to significantly expand their presence in Latvia. We discussed the brutal Russia's war against Ukraine and Russia's preparation for confrontation against the West and their aims to weaken across the globe. Lithuania highly values cooperation with Canada when it comes to international sanctions against Russia and Belarus and support for Ukraine. We have agreed that we must stay united and determined when stopping the Russian aggression and supporting Ukraine until its victory. The peace must be determined by not the aggressor, but by Ukraine that is defending the European freedom. Only in this way we can expect a stable peace in Europe. For this, we need to integrate Ukraine into the Euro-Atlantic security architecture faster. Only by removing the gray zones, we can end the vicious cycle of Russian wars in Ukraine, in Europe. Together with my counterpart, we discussed the NATO summit issues, also deterrence and defense issues, especially in the eastern flank, and the Ukrainian path towards NATO, as well as investments into defense. I do believe that this week in Vilnius, the decisions that we will make, that they will be significant and courageous. With this Euro-Atlantic security architecture, the aggressor will not even think about using the force. Once again, I welcome my colleague Justin Trudeau in Vilnius, not only to participate in the historic NATO summit, but also on these very important occasions for our bilateral relations. Thank you.
Tout le monde. Thank you, Ingrida, Prime Minister Simonetta, for inviting me to sit down and discuss matters with you in this extraordinarily beautiful spot. It really is something that highlights not just the beauty of your country, but the history as well. And it is very fitting that we start our approach gathering for NATO here tonight. We couldn't have a better host for the NATO summit than Lithuania at this incredibly consequential moment. You are a Baltic country, a democracy within close proximity to Russia. You understand the realities of the current security environment in Europe better than most. I very much appreciated hearing your perspective and also strengthening the bilateral relationship between our two countries. Earlier this afternoon, I was in Latvia at Camp Adadzi, where Canada announced that we are more than doubling our current troop deployment to enhanced forward presence Latvia. This will make a significant contribution to NATO readiness in the region and helps us achieve the commitment we made at the Madrid NATO summit last year to scale up EFP Latvia to a brigade to continue to deter Russian aggression across the Baltics. Canadian armed forces are leading, training, and working alongside NATO troops from almost a dozen countries. And this multinational effort is incredibly important for defense and security. The strong relationships we share as allies and like-minded democracies are more important than ever. This is one of the reasons Canada is expanding its diplomatic presence in the Baltics. We're expanding our embassy in Riga, and we're officially establishing a Canadian embassy in Lithuania here in Vilnius, as well as a Canadian embassy in Estonia. As members of the transatlantic community, it is more important than ever that we deepen our ties. La Première ministre Simonetta et moi avons discuté de l'agression persistante de la Russie et condamné l'invasion illégale et injustifiable de l'Ukraine par Poutine. L'indépendance et l'intégrité territoriale des nations souveraines doivent être respectées. On est solidaire de l'Ukraine et des femmes et des hommes héroïques qui se battent sans relâche pour défendre leur pays, leur langue et leur droit de choisir leur propre avenir. We will stand up to any aggressor who tries to impose their own belief that might makes right. We are united in our mission to protect freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. Thank you. Merci. Ačiū.
Merci. Thank you.
Dėkojame gerbėmiems ministrams pirmininkams. Linkime gražios dienos.
Thank you, dear Prime Ministers, and have a great day.
And that's that. And new questions taken. News. Take note of that phrase, rules-based international order. There it is again. That's what this is all about. This is about, really, in a way, sovereignty. This is NATO, Western countries, saying to Russia and other countries, indirectly, that they're the boss. This is globalism. Rules-based international order. NATO makes the rules, everybody has to follow them. Two schools of thought on that. If you have a rules-based international order that all countries are supposed to abide by, basically codified or a code of conduct written down on a piece of paper that applies to all countries universally, then you could argue that that would potentially lead to world peace if all countries abide by the same rules instead of individual agreements or treaties from one nation to another. Russia is saying, hey, wait a minute, you guys don't dictate to us. We're a sovereign nation, and international law, which is actually a form of natural or common law, if you want to look at it that way, then enhanced with various agreements between Russia and other nation states. That dictates the way that Russia would interact with all different countries, a bunch of different agreements, because Russia is a sovereign state. They're saying NATO's not going to dictate to us what the rules are going to be, essentially. That's why they keep saying, Russia is engaged in an illegal war. That's why they talk about the rule of law or the rule of international law, but it's a rules-based international order. You see what I'm saying? It's the law according to NATO, and that's where a lot of other countries who are not part of NATO take exception to it. It's a group of countries that have gotten together, and they've made up some rules. They wrote them all down. They all agree to them, and they're saying other countries have to abide by them now as well, even if they haven't signed, even if they're not members of NATO or the European Union. If they're not part of the club, you still have to abide by these rules, and anybody that violates them, or anybody that doesn't just agree to abide by them or just acknowledge that those are the rules, then they're outlaws. That's what it's all about. It's about sovereignty. And it is, in a way, that tells you that this is a struggle between nationalism, the idea of individual nation states having sovereignty over themselves, and a globalist approach to governance, a one world government. If there is a rules-based international order that all countries must abide by, then whoever makes those rules controls the world. Think about that. Think about that.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals. Defenders of individual rights and freedoms. Credible. Trusted. Grounded in reality. Maverick News. Maverick News. Defending free speech. Free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Too late. Too late. Too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Just a little Canadian news, a brief Canadian story before we move on to more international stuff and U.S. news too. Some important stuff down there on the U.S. side. And wait till I tell you about the Antifa thing. Toronto Star, Torstar, Post Media Network, Canada Corp, and Nordstar Capital LP, the majority owner of the Toronto Star, as well as a whole bunch of other smaller newspapers under the Metroland banner across Canada, have announced today that I guess these merger talks, which would lead to even further consolidation of ownership of media in Canada, I guess these talks have fallen apart. So the framework of this proposed merger would have seen Post Media transfer its newspapers, dozens of them, over to Metroland, and then voting control of the new entity would have been split 50-50 between the two sides. But today, both sides announced that those talks have now broken down. There was a lot of interest in this because, as you know, when you get more consolidation of ownership, and we've seen a lot of that over the last decade, even 2 decades, you end up really with less service, fewer voices, fewer journalists employed, and I think the public is not as well served. I guess the two sides just haven't been able to come to an agreement. And you add to that, in Canada, there's a lot of regulation, government involvement in these kinds of, what do I call them, negotiations. That this stuff has to ultimately be approved by government. And this is just falling apart. So we'll see if it's rekindled in any way in the days or weeks ahead, but it looks right now like they're going to be regrouping, and I'm not sure where it all leads. These big media companies have been saying for a long time that they're poor. They can't make a go of it. It's a hostile financial environment, that they can't survive in the face of this changing technology, the internet. And it's true. So much ad revenue has left the mainstream media and flows into social media now that they absolutely I think are having more trouble making a profit. But then Trudeau rides in, it coughs up millions of taxpayers' dollars and just hands it over to these mainstream legacy media companies in order to keep them afloat, keep them going. And of course, the people at the top running these big media corporations, they just suck up that public money. And they're quite happy to rejig their finances to let the public, bankroll their operations. Anyway, a lot more to be said about that, and we'll probably get into that more in the days ahead. But tonight, that merger has fallen apart, and that's probably a good thing, but for the public. But I don't think we've heard the last of it. These media companies always have a way of coming back, and they always have a way of coming back and rekindling these deals or coming up with some alternative deal. What I'm saying is they always seem to get what they want and get what they need, but more so get what they want, which is money. What else do we have for you tonight? How about that Larry Nasser? Let's show you a picture of him. Hang on. This is the guy this is the child sex offender that we told you about in the preview tonight. Well, there's a picture of him. So he's an ex-USA gymnastics doctor. And what can I tell you here? Okay, let me just get my notes up. I made some notes. So this is another breaking story. He's currently serving a decades-long prison term because he was sexually abusing young female gymnasts. And he was brutally attacked today. Nasser is 59 years old. He was stabbed multiple times, I believe 7 times, during an altercation with another inmate at the United States Penitentiary in Coleman in Sumterville, Florida. The incident took place actually yesterday at 2:30 in the afternoon. And this has been confirmed for us by the Florida Board of Prisons. Nasser actually says here in these notes that I've got down, or at least from the statement from the Board of Prisons, that he was stabbed 6 times. I have heard 7, but this official statement says 6. 6 stab wounds in the chest. Well, I'm sorry. 2 in the neck and 2 in the back. So this is updated. 6, 7, 8, 9. So that's 10 times, 10 stab wounds in total. So that's where we're at with that. I guess when you stab that many times, what's 4 more? According to Joe Rojas, president of Local 506, the union which represents prison employees, Nasser suffered a collapsed lung, but is now in stable condition and did receive immediate medical attention. So this is not the first time Nasser has been targeted in prison. As you know, sexual predators, especially sexual predators who targeted children, are not well liked in the prison community. Previously, Nasser was assaulted while in the general prison population, which led to his transfer from a facility in Tucson to the current prison in Florida. So prison staff there did react quickly. They actually saved his life. But there are also concerns tonight about staffing shortages at the prison, with some suggestions or allegations or, I guess, criticisms that staff shortages are putting inmates and employees at risk. And this is an example of what can happen, I guess, if you don't have enough prison employees. Or you could say that the union might be using this incident to lobby for more money and more staff. Nasser's case gained international attention after hundreds of athletes, including renowned Olympic champions Simone Biles, Ali Raisman, and Michaela Maroney, came forward with allegations of sexual abuse. Those athletes claimed that Nasser exploited their trust under the guise of medical treatment. The revelations about Nasser's abuse prompted USA Gymnastics to report him to the FBI back in 2015 and notify the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee. However, it was nearly a full year, before the FBI initiated an investigation. The Indianapolis Star published a story back in September of 2016 revealing the allegations made by 2 former gymnasts against Nasser, and it later emerged that additional complaints had been made by Michigan State athletes, which were ignored. Nasser was finally arrested in November 2016 and subsequently pled guilty to federal child pornography charges and state sexual abuse charges in 2017. That resulted in an effective life sentence. So what this brought to the surface was failures to address concerns like this, and the failures to address Nasser's actions, both within the Olympic movement and by law enforcement, triggered congressional investigations and scrutiny of the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee. These investigations exposed systemic inadequacies in addressing sexual abuse, such as the lack of proper background checks and inconsistent athlete safety programs across different sports federations. And as you know, right now there is heightened interest in subjects, stories just like this one. I have to wonder if that heightened interest and all this focus through the media, and maybe even the movie Sound of Freedom, maybe that precipitated what we are now witnessing in the prison system, where Nasser was stabbed. What was the motivation behind that? What was the mindset behind that? What fueled that? Emotions are running high because there's so much media attention focused on this issue right now. As a result of the Nasser scandal, the U.S. Center for Safe Sport was established to investigate sexual abuse within the Olympic movement. Leadership changes were also implemented in USA Gymnastics and the USOPC. Nasser's survivors pursued legal action against Michigan State University, USA Gymnastics, and the USOPC. And in 2018, Michigan State reached a settlement of $500 million with the survivors and was fined $4.5 million by the U.S. Department of Education. Recently, USA Gymnastics and the USOPC agreed to pay $380 million in settlements to more than 500 women who reported abuse by Nasser. 500. Their coach or individuals affiliated with the sport. So this is a story that is not over with, because this guy here is still alive and kicking after that brutal assault, stabbed. I heard 7, then now it's like 10 times. So there you go. That's the statement from the Board of Prisons, and that's the latest information on the Nasser case. Don't go away. More ahead right after this.
The New World Order. Government overreach. The Great Reset. Mainstream media lies. Now more than ever, independent voices are needed. Donate now at freedomreporters.com. That's freedomreporters.com. Maverick News. The antivirus program for your mind.
Okay, I'm back. And there's a weird story here. So let's get into this one. This isn't entirely new, but for whatever reason, it's going around again. It's been, well, it's just this simple. If you type in ANTIFA.com, guess where the domain leads? Well, let me show you. Here we go. I'm going to type in ANTIFA.com. And you know where it leads? Kind of weird. Here. whitehouse.org. Isn't that kind of weird? And it's true. You can try it on your computer right now. The thing is, this has been the case, well, quite a while, actually. But it is getting a bunch of attention again. I'm not exactly sure why, but people have started sending me this over the last couple of days. And people are, it freaks people out. And it is kind of weird. And you would think that the government, if they didn't want this going on, would have some way to stop it. I mean, they have all these high-paid hackers, cyber terrorist experts who are supposed to defend the country. And yet here's the United States government run by Joe Biden. And for months, they've allowed this domain to redirect. Antifa.com redirects to whitehouse.org, the government website, the White House website. if you were the president and you're the commander in chief, the head honcho for the most powerful military in the world, in an age of information warfare and cyber terrorism, wouldn't you think that you'd do something about that? If you were concerned, if you were maybe embarrassed to be associated with an organization like Antifa, unless, of course, you're not embarrassed to be associated with Antifa. So I'm telling you, man, it's a real thing. And it's, as I said, this has been the case for a little while. And so you can go to PolitiFact, where they check their fact checkers. Well, you don't need to check the fact because the fact is the fact, Jack. And the fact is that Antifa.com still leads to whitehouse.org. And again, people are taking note. So here's PolitiFact. Go to Antifa.com and it takes you to Biden's White House, just a slap in the face. And they say it's half true. No, it's just true. It does go to the White House. I just proved it to you. And you can do it right now on any computer, anywhere, anytime. Antifa.com, put it into your URL bar, and it will pop you right over to Joe Biden's home, White House, the whitehouse.org. And it does. It redirects to the White House. Now, why would that be? Well, you know, it's not to say that the government has done it. So I did a little bit of digging, and it don't take much. You could get this information with just a few minutes of just online searching yourself. And that domain leads, well, here's first of all, if you do a database search, a basic database search here, you'll see that Antifa.com is taken. You can't buy it. Somebody already owns it. Oh, they're saying they might even help you be able to buy it for $89.99. No, you won't. They won't get it for that. And here it is. It's registered through, or was purchased through, it appears to be, it's parked over there at namecheap.com. Who actually owns it? Well, you can see that we can't see. It doesn't really tell you who the owner is. They've got that private. However, do a little bit more research. And again, it doesn't take much to do this. And let's see here. What else can we find out? I discovered that the domain has been purchased by someone in Iceland. At least whoever has it has an address in Iceland that this domain is associated with. So Antifa.com, it's registered with Namecheap. And I don't know if is Namecheap in Iceland? No, Namecheap is in Phoenix, Arizona. So even though it's registered with Namecheap in Phoenix, Arizona, that's just where with the company that it was purchased through, and is still basically there. But the owner appears to be in Iceland. So if you go here, isn't this kind of, it is weird. It's registered to Reykjavik, someone in Reykjavik. On the street name is Kalfisnegverger. I can't pronounce it because I don't speak the language. Number 2 in the capital region, postal code 101 in Iceland, IS. Here's a phone number. Let's phone the phone number, shall we? That's a good idea, Rick. Let's do that. I have a way to do that without incurring any charges. Hang on a second here. Let's phone whoever owns this domain, if this is their phone number. Here we go. I think I better, it's not a 1. I'll just put this here. Let's see if it works. that's not okay. Is it what is the Iceland phone? It's not +1. It's not going through, so it's +354. Oh, I don't know. Hang on a second here. Let me take this out. I've never phoned Iceland before. This is a first for me. Hello, owner of this domain. We are calling you. Here we go. See if the phone number goes through. Let me bring it up so you can hear the audio. See if it works. Nothing. Not working. Nope, phone number's not working. So that didn't work. I want to talk to whoever owns it. Find out more about it. We'll have to dig a little bit deeper. How about if we go through Google Maps, zoom in, and find out what this building looks like? Let's go right down to the street level and have a look and see where the person works or lives or whatever. See where this thing is registered. Here's Iceland. Here it is. There's the street. Let's go right in, shall we? We'll zoom right in and we'll take a look. Hello, domain owner. Are you friendly to Joe Biden or are you a foe? Friend or foe? Zoom in closer and closer and closer. Okay, there it is. There's the pinpoint. You can see that. See that red dot? That's where we're going, folks. And you see over there on the left, that's the street. There it is. So it's registered to somebody in one of these buildings here. It's a business district in Iceland. No ice on the streets right there, though. Which building is it? I don't know. Could be in any of these buildings. I guess if we were there, we'd have to go start knocking on doors, just checking the address and see which one of these units it's registered to. Isn't that weird? If indeed it even is registered to somebody here. Let's check the chat. Maybe somebody's trying to tell me something. Pure Knight says it's a CIA office. It may well be. The plot thickens. Yeah, that's where the server is. Yeah. I guess. My guess is whoever has this domain probably isn't there. If you did that, would you hang out at the address associated with the domain? I don't think so. Not moi. No. I wouldn't hang out there. Yeah. Pure Knight says Iceland isn't green. Yeah, I don't know. Time change, whatever. Doesn't really matter. Anyway, this is just something that has come up again. I just thought I'd address it here tonight because I've had multiple people just in the last 2 days send me the information. Go look at this domain. It's antifa.com. Goes to the White House. And it's true. But, you know, anybody can purchase a domain and then have it redirect someplace. I'm surprised that someone was able to get it and then redirect it. I'm surprised they were able to get it. You would think Antifa as an organization would want it. Or maybe Antifa has done this. We don't know. It's all pure speculation beyond the information that I've shown you as fact. And it is a fact. It's not half true. It's just true. It redirects to whitehouse.org. Joe Biden doesn't seem to mind. As I said, if I were president and that were the case, I would take steps. I'd be calling up somebody. with expertise and responsibility in this area. And I would be saying, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't look good. This actually is a really bad thing for national, I would say even national security in a way, because it erodes public trust in government in a really negative way. And if this is malicious, I would probably have them take some steps to prevent that URL from redirecting to the website, because it's like a form of hacking in a way. It's meant to make the White House look bad, unless you like Antifa, in which case they would look good. And maybe if you think they're good and you're in power, maybe you don't care if the government that you're heading up, that you're responsible for, that you maybe as commander in chief, you don't care. Maybe you like having Antifa.com redirect, not just to your place of business, but your home, the White House.
Maverick News. The world is watching. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, so I have something here for everyone, because people have been asking about Fred. So I just want to show you Fred is alive. Here he is. Hang on. Here's Fred. See, he's alive. He's still alive and kicking. He's doing okay. He's here because his tank is getting cleaned out, and he's quite happy in there. And I have to be real careful here so I don't knock him over. So Fred the Freedom Fish. Okay, Fred, buddy, there you go. There you are, man. Fred the Freedom Fish is alive and well, and he's quite content in that little thing right now. When I brought him home from the prison where they'd enslaved him, and I liberated him from the fish concentration camp, and gave him not just liberty, but a whole country, a fishtopia. They had them in a little cup. They keep them in little cups. Anyway, more on the Freedom Fred fish front, maybe tomorrow, depending how things go. Not only does he have one person in that fishtopia, and as you know, the part of what we're doing here with the Freedom Fred thing is we're looking at the larger concepts of politics as we create a sovereign aquatic nation for our freedom-loving fish. And he started off alone. And there is one person now who has invaded his territory, and that's the guy that we showed you has the gun. So there were issues there. It seems they've reached sort of an agreement, but tomorrow, or whenever we get to this, as soon as this happens, there's another player who has happened on the scene. And it's going to complicate the political landscape considerably, because this player has incredible power beyond imagination, nuclear power. And we'll explain all of that when we get back to the Freedom Fishtopia story and scenario, something that all of us can contemplate, participate in, a conversation that will explore the larger issues of politics and the creation of nation states on a small scale, a 5-gallon tank, a Fishtopia. Okay, what else do I have for you tonight? Oh, yes, inflation. Did you know that there's a new story out today that shows Canadians, and I would say by extension, this is a reflection of what's going on in the United States too. Canadians are on the edge financially. At least half of Canadians have indicated, according to a new report, that they are just $200 away or less from not being able to pay all of their bills by the end of each month. So this is a report from an insolvency firm called MNP Limited. And they're saying that as interest rates and the rising cost of living have stretched budgets, it's putting more and more people on the verge of a real financial crisis. So this indicates that 52% of Canadians are in that situation, or a very similar situation to that. $200. That's all that separates them each month from being able to pay their bills or not pay their bills. And that's up from April, where the same basic survey was done. And now, as of last month in June, because this all comes out came out in June, being reported now, an additional 6% of Canadians have fallen into that situation. So this is a result of the escalating burden of household bills, food prices, energy bills. And, even as they calculate the CPI, the Consumer Price Index in Canada, quite often what they're doing now is they're leaving, key staple products for many Canadians and Americans out of the equation. The Consumer Price Index is basically an examination where they select a basket of goods and services, but mostly goods, and determine what the average prices are of those things. And then month over month or year over year, they look at the price change in that given basket of goods to determine what the Consumer Price Index is, how much inflation has there been. And of course, we're being told that, inflation right now is, 3.5%, 4%, somewhere in that range. So the Minister of Finance, Chrystia Freeland, has been saying, see, inflation is down. It's not like 5% anymore. It's not in that range. It's like 3.5%. But the other thing that they're not really telling Canadians, it's like, okay, so it's say 3.5. Not that that's real. It's not. That's a cooked number. but let's say it's 3.5. If you go back over the past even 5-6 years, what you're getting is, increases in the CPI, increases in prices year over year over year over year over year. And if you go back, say, 5 years and look at even other staple items like, say, butter was selling for about $3.90, sometimes $3.50 a pound, $4, just say 4 or 5 years ago. Today, if you go just to buy butter, you could pay like $6, $6.50, $7. I've seen it in some places. $7 for a pound of butter. So that's a big difference between, say 4 and we'll say even 6 or $6.50. That's like a 40, that's almost a doubling in price over that amount of time. You've seen, I'm seeing consistent, even in the last year, price increases as high as 30% for some items. If you look at just frozen fish, the price of frozen fish, even the processed stuff, those Highliner fish stick things, those used to be just a year ago around here, $9.99 for a box of fish sticks. Today, $15.99, $16.99 for the same frozen fish, processed frozen fish. So that's about a 50% increase. That's a huge hit for anybody. Now, the government can sit there and say 3.5% is manageable. And at any given time, the government is always aiming for an inflation rate based on the kind of economic system we have of about 2% per year inflation, which they say, allows for adequate growth with manageable inflation. But when prices increase, when you're saving money, that erodes your savings. That takes away your spending power. When you get up above 2%, 2.5%, you get into 3, 5, you've got actual problems. And in real terms, you're seeing, I would say, real inflation, maybe 15 to 20%. And then that over year, in some cases, you've seen your spending power erode 30 to 50%. So if you saved your money all your life for retirement and you've got it socked away in the bank someplace, or maybe even in, some investments, but, low yield, low risk, the value of everything you've worked for, saved for, in just a matter of a few years, the government, through their policies, they just cut your wage in half. So you thought you were working all your life for, say, $30 an hour. But at the end of the day now, and it is the end of the day for you because now you're in retirement and you're on your pension. Now your pension money's worth only, say, 30%, maybe even only half of what you actually worked for. So you weren't working for $30 an hour, man. You were working $15 an hour all those years. You thought it was 30, but because of inflation, by the time you get to the end, it's only 15. Now, in a capitalistic society, if you've had mutual funds or other investments and you've made your money grow, then, you're benefiting from whatever economic growth you may have experienced through your investments. That's capitalism. But whatever you've accumulated, the value of that has over just the past 4, 5, 6 years been cut anywhere from 30 to 50% across the board on a lot of items. And collectively, that's your CPI, your consumer price index. Government doesn't really look at it that way. They don't report it that way because they want you to feel better about it, as they basically impose this taxation through inflation. And so tonight we're seeing more and more Canadians on the edge. This is a major problem in reality, because if interest rates continue to rise, a lot of Canadians, and I would say by extension, the same situation may be in play in the United States. We're on the verge of having a lot of people declare bankruptcy. because they won't be able to pay their mortgages. They won't be able to pay their bills. And if they don't go bankrupt, they're going to starve. It's not a good situation. We're in actually a bit of trouble. And the government just keeps sugarcoating this. So something to continue to keep our eyes on. I don't know where it's going to go. But at some point, it's got to collapse. James Lewis, who was the prime suspect in those unsolved 1982 Tylenol murders, he's dead. He was 76 years old. He was never charged in the 7 murders, but was the only person that was ever targeted by law enforcement as a suspect. And he has been a suspect for more than 40 years. Do you remember that case? It was a really bad deal for Tylenol. People used to then refer to Tylenol after that as Tylenide, I remember, which is not really funny. So Lewis, as I said, was never charged in those 7 murders. But he was the only guy they ever looked at. So police say that they've taken a look at his death and the circumstances surrounding it are not suspicious. 7 people in the Chicago area were killed. They ranged in ages from 12 to 35 after they ingested extra strength Tylenol capsules that were laced with cyanide. Lewis was in his 30s back then and denied any involvement in the deaths. But Lewis was convicted of attempted extortion after writing a ransom note to Johnson & Johnson, the parent company that manufactures Tylenol. Where else have I heard Johnson & Johnson, Johnson & Johnson? Oh, didn't they get involved in research into some thing that was made mandatory for a lot of people recently? I got to rack my brain. What were they involved with? Oh, yeah. Something about a thing in the arm. Anyway, Lewis demanded in that ransom note $1 million from Johnson & Johnson if you want to stop the killing, is what was said in the note. So the Chicago Tribune revisited the case last year. They did a report. It was an 8-episode podcast series, and they included a review of all the documents and video evidence that had been sourced by law enforcement. Still a story that continues to generate public interest and back in the news tonight because of the death of Lewis. The postmark on the letter that appeared with it that was sent to Johnson & Johnson showed that Lewis wrote the letter before the public knew the deaths were linked to the Tylenol pills. So the evidence seemed to have been pretty clear, but even after all this time, no justice. It wasn't just justice delayed in the end because Lewis lived out his life and no charges were laid against him or anyone else. The victims were just denied justice. I'll be right back.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, so back to Russia. An update on that whole thing with the Wagner Group. Russian President Vladimir Putin actually did meet with Yevgeny Prigozhin, the leader of the Wagner Group. Yes, he did. Just days after that convoy, some say attempted coup, whatever it was, the Kremlin has confirmed that this meeting took place now. Some are calling it a mutiny. Putin himself referred to it as a mutiny. So, according to Dmitry Peskov, the spokesperson for the Kremlin, Prigozhin was among the 35 Wagner commanders who were invited to the meeting in Moscow. Peskov stated that President Putin provided an assessment on the ongoing war in Ukraine and the recent mutiny, whatever you want to call it. Some are saying it wasn't a mutiny. I don't know. Putin used the word mutiny, so I guess it's a mutiny. The mutiny, which began on June 23rd, didn't last long, only 24 hours. As part of a deal to resolve the situation, which involved Wagner troops, mainstream media say they seized a city. Well, they were in a city, and then they created, they got a convoy going, and they were heading toward Moscow. And I understand that they did shoot down some Russian helicopters. So it appears that they were out of control. This private military operation company, some would say mercenary group, that comes from Russia, has been fighting on Russia's behalf. Anyway, charges against Prigozhin were dropped, and then he was told he could go to Belarus. So prior to the incident, there had been a lot of public disagreement between Wagner and Russia's Ministry of Defense regarding the conduct of the war. Prigozhin had repeatedly accused the ministry of failing to provide adequate ammunition to his group. However, Peskov has announced that Prigozhin was one of the commanders invited to the Kremlin 5 days after the incident had collapsed. He stated, "The president provided an assessment of the company's actions on the front. He also evaluated the events of June 24th. Putin listened to the commander's explanations and suggested various options for their future employment and continued involvement in combat." So these words tonight suggests to me that this is like a business dispute more than anything. And I think Putin maybe was wise to treat it as such rather than just put it down by taking out the Wagner troops, which is, I think, what people in the West were certainly hoping for. According to Peskov, Prigozhin expressed his unconditional support for Putin during the meeting. Again, shake hands, kiss, make up. Currently, the whereabouts of Prigozhin, we don't know. We just don't know. But in related developments, Alexander Lukashenko, the leader of Belarus, who brokered this deal between Putin and Prigozhin, recently stated that Prigozhin is in Russia. So if that's true, he ain't in Belarus yet. Is he going to Belarus? I don't know. The whole thing seems a little weird to me. You would think that if you've got an actual mutiny on your hands, that the guy leading it might find himself in jeopardy when you're up against somebody like Putin. You would think that if you shot down some Russian helicopters with your private military force, that there might be hell to pay. But this is kind of unusual. We're in war. Seems like Prigozhin was upset because his company was being basically told that it had to dissolve and that his troops were going to be folded into the Russian military. They were in many respects going to put Prigozhin out of the business of mercenary operations or private military operations as an extension of or a military contractor for Russia. So I don't know. But the Wagner Group, as I said, is a private army basically, and they were fighting alongside regular Russian troops in Ukraine, and they've been doing that for quite some time. But then there were some setbacks in the battlefield, apparently, and then Prigozhin took to social media, started criticizing, some of the Russian military leaders, saying, "You're not sending us enough ammunition. Where's the ammo?" Then there were CIA reports that suggested he was stockpiling the ammo and that he had more ammo than he was letting on. All kinds of speculation, but we do know now for sure that Prigozhin met with Putin, the Kremlin confirming it. And as Prigozhin was doing all this stuff on social media, he was specifically targeting Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and Chief of the General Staff, Valery Gerasimov. They're two of the highest ranking military figures in Russia. And those are the two guys responsible for Russia's, mainstream media calling it an invasion, special military operation, whatever you want to call it. But those are the guys running the show for Putin. So Prigozhin didn't actually come out and actually condemn Putin, didn't really blame him, probably wise, probably saved his neck. But I don't think this thing is over. It didn't look good for the Russians. Didn't look good on Putin internationally. But then on the other hand, when I sit back and look at the way Putin dealt with it, calm, level-headed, I was sitting back waiting while, everybody was freaking out. And the mainstream media in the West was saying, Putin's hours are numbered. And I was like, I don't think so. This probably isn't going to end the way the mainstream media is predicting, and it didn't. And I wasn't sure what was going to happen. I was honestly surprised that it ended the way that it did, but it just shows that Putin is able to kind of take a calm, cool, level-headed, collected approach to dealing with any kind of crisis. A very mature, methodical man. So General Gerasimov appeared in public for the first time since the incident just recently, and speculation has been circulating that the Wagner Group's march was canceled in exchange for the general's removal from his position. However, there has been footage airing on Russian television that shows Gerasimov giving orders to attract Ukrainian missile sites, so it looks like he's still there. And the same video indicates that President Putin has retained both him and Shoigu. So whatever reports came out saying that Prigozhin had pressured and successfully Putin into making changes at the top of the military command structure appear to not be true tonight, at least not yet. Nevertheless, if I were Prigozhin, I'd still be sleeping with one eye open, because this didn't look good on Putin at all. Okay, let's take another quick break, and I'll return right after this.
We are Mavericks. We say no to the Trudeau and Biden New World Order. And to bugs. Because bugs are creepy and gross. And people should not eat bugs. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Hey, no! 2 bucks!
So we've seen some people referring or acknowledging or pointing to or talking about over the past few days the collapse, as it's been described, of the Dutch government. I just wanted to comment on it tonight. Well, first of all, we're seeing that there is some new development there. Here's a mainstream media report out of ABC News, all kinds of mainstream and independent reporting on this tonight internationally, saying the Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte will leave politics after the election, which will be held now because he has basically dissolved his government, which people are referring to as the collapse of the Dutch government. And so him saying today that he's actually just going to leave politics is significant because he's been in politics for, a long time. But I want to comment on this tonight because this is not what some people think that it is, or the way that it's been described, at least by people calling in talking about it on this program over the last few nights. People referring to it as the collapse of the Dutch government. So here we see in this report, Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte, the Netherlands' longest serving premier, said that he will be leaving politics after an early general election, which was, and this is key, sparked by a dispute over immigration, that led to his government's resignation. So this ends nearly 13 years in power for this conservative leader. A lot of people call him, well, they use the phrase Teflon because scandals don't stick to him, just like Trudeau, right? Doesn't matter what happens. It's like nothing seems to stick to the guy. But this one, this controversy, this inability for him to deal with this issue resulted in the collapse of his party. But he's 56 years old, leader of the People's Party for Freedom and Democracy. Okay? And he announced this decision at a parliamentary debate to discuss the fall of his latest government coalition. And there were a number of different parties involved in keeping the current government structure, or the current government in power. It wasn't just his party. And so some people called up here the other night and just in passing, a few comments saying, gee, I wish the Canadians would stand up and force the collapse of the Canadian government in the same way that we've seen in this case with the Dutch prime minister, stepping aside and the government collapsing, thinking that this is a good thing because of all the all the issues that I guess people on the freedom side of things are focused on. Issues, like immigration. But this isn't what people are thinking. They think this is the result of all the protests that we've seen. And it sort of is, but it isn't. And you're not going to get the result that you think you're going to get by having this government collapse. The reason I say that is Rutt's on the conservative side. He didn't want as much immigration. And this issue, all this pressure, and you're seeing all of the protests over there, over the farmland and all these other issues. His government fell apart. Why? Because the other parties have been putting so much pressure. They couldn't reach an agreement on migration. If in this election that's coming up, his government, that more conservative government, is not elected and remain in power in some way, if you're not in favor of the migration, you're going to get a whole bunch more of it because the other parties, like the Greens, want more of it. So while everybody, is like, yay, the government collapsed. The government did not collapse. The government was, the governing party had to dissolve government, but the system remains in place. The system of government is still there, and they'll have an election. And if a different party comes to power, any of the other ones, pretty much, I think, not that I'm an expert on politics in that part of the world, or in that country, but I do know enough to know that these other parties, for the most part, they advocate for more of a global approach to governance and more migration. More, not less. That's why they couldn't come to an agreement. So the government fell apart. Not because of the things that everybody calling in here thinks they fell apart. That's not why. So brace yourselves. Not that it's going to have a direct impact here, other than to say that kind of all these European, Western countries, the things that happen there, it's happening everywhere. Everything, it's like one thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. That's the way she goes. Anyway, time to go to the phones. Let's do that, shall we? Take another break while I set the phones up. Here's the number to call.
Join the conversation. Call 1-833-975-3733. That's 1-833-975. Free. Speak up. Speak out. Make your voice heard. Maverick News. Fighting for freedom by defending your right to free speech. Be a Maverick. Join us.
Okay, the phone lines are set up. The number to call is 1-833-975-3733. 1-833-975-3733. I will run this while you guys get your fingers all warmed up and start dialing that number. Don't go away.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
Again, I'll just run this. 1-833-975-3733. That's the number to call right there. 1-833-975-FREE to join the conversation tonight.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals. Defenders of individual rights and freedoms. Credible. Trusted. Grounded in reality. Maverick News. Maverick News. Defending free speech. Free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, again, 1-833-975-3733 is the number to call to join the conversation tonight. Let's go to our first caller of the night. And it's Steve. How are you tonight?
Okay, Rick. How are you?
I'm just fine, thank you. You want to talk
That's good.
about the economy?
Oh, I was calling about bank cancellations. The other night when I called in there, we were talking about Nigel Farage, and one of the things that I kind of forgot to mention at the time, and it was on my mind, was at GBN News or GB News over there.
Yep.
They had started a petition. Have you heard about the petition regarding CBDCs that they have?
Oh, I did hear
So-
something about it.
Yeah, so just like here, you get so many signatures, you can bring it into the House or whatever, into Parliament, I mean. So they have this thing where they want to keep cash. I guess it's not so much to block the CBDCs, as it is to make sure that cash stays around. And they were quantifying some numbers, like there's over 1 million people that simply just don't have bank accounts, and there's no accounting for who that might be, you know. And of course, many people have been debanked or whatever. So this petition has raised, it was over 125,000, 125 plus, I think, last time I saw it.
That's huge.
Yeah, well, yeah, they don't have a great population over there. I mean, large, that is. I forget how many, 35 million people, I think. But I just thought that was important that they're doing this. And the fact that they're not challenging the CBDC, but the petition is to ensure that cash stays, which everything I've seen prior to this has been to stop CBDCs, but that's a separate issue. And I think that's a valid way of going about it. Like, let's preserve cash, and then we'll take on the CBDCs.
I think that you're right. I think that's the logical, most effective course of action, because I don't think there's any stopping the digitization of the economy. But if you can preserve cash, then you've essentially addressed the issue.
Exactly. And they had a guest on as well, and they quoted this twice, but they didn't specify. But they said that there's 5 million people that have been effectively debanked. Now, they didn't limit it to England or the UK or across the world, but that was a stat that came up twice in this one interview that I had been listening to about it. And they were actually, Nigel was the subject initially, and then they moved on. And that's a lot of people. And I mean, at a certain point, I can see a whole spin-off coming up, like not just like a Bitcoin auction, but another auction. If they put enough pressure on people, we'll have to generate something, some other way to do it. And who knows what that's going to look like. But I just thought it was interesting what they did there with that petition.
That's one of the most the positive things I've heard in quite a while, because that can be effective at work.
Yeah, I agree. And this is, how we talk about the Commonwealth as well at times. I was thinking, if there was more of a cohesion amongst the Commonwealth countries, it would be interesting to see that go Commonwealth-wide. I hear people like Biden talking about England and the strategic partnership they have and how it's unique and stuff like that. I think, why aren't these conversations, coming up between Commonwealth countries? I wish there was still a greater value to being part of the Commonwealth. Anyway, that's something I think, what does the Commonwealth do for us anymore? Not to say that we need to be out of it, or again, it's not about the monarchy or whatever. You would think, we have NATO and we have NAFTA, and we have all these trading partnerships. You would think that the Commonwealth would be a really cohesive group, and we don't seem to be. But maybe that's just the sheer size.
You're kind of right in that regard. I mean, aside from the Commonwealth Games, what else is there that really benefits any of the member nation states, right? It's like, we're part of the Commonwealth. It's more like they're just, each country has its link back to the king and the monarchy and England, but not really matter that much, that there's not much of a link, from the different countries together. Except I think there are some provisions in place where it's a little easier for you to get citizenship in another Commonwealth country or get a work permit. I think there are provisions like that.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if those still hold anymore. I know that I mentioned this before. I had 2 university professors, and they benefited greatly from it. But at the time, I was not able to benefit in the same way. They were both able to get citizenship and something to do with their university being paid for.
Yeah.
Not the great expense that you would otherwise have. And I had explored by then actually going to England to do postgrad stuff. And the numbers were just never going to make it for me. It was so expensive.
Yeah, my brother went to Australia and worked there for a while, and he spent I think he was there for about a year, and did a lot of different things over there. And that was, again, I think because it was a Commonwealth country, that he was able to go over and do those sorts of things. So there are some provisions like that benefit people, or make it a little easier for some people to go to some countries if you're from a Commonwealth country going to a Commonwealth country. But don't, quote me on that. I haven't looked at it that closely, because I've never had any interest in going to another Commonwealth country to work or live myself. So I'm not an expert in any regard.
There seems to be a kinship, I find, amongst more between like Canada and Australia, for instance. We have so many similarities than between, I don't know, maybe Canada and the UK in some ways, because we're like that, shunned child that's overseas, just sending money back home kind of thing. I don't know. That's how I feel about it. Yeah. And actually, while we're talking about GB News, the BBC, have you heard about their latest scandal? It's bad timing for them. One of their evening presenters has now been found in a bit of a sex scandal. To me, I was kind of surprised it blew up the extent it is, but one of their presenters was paying for pictures from a youth.
Yeah, she was, what was she, 17, 16? 17, I think she was, right?
Yeah, 17. which is weird because they could have, they could have been together, but it was the issue because it's pictures. It's taking advantage. So
Yes.
that's kind of a weird thing. And
Yeah, because the age of consent there is, what is it?
16, I think.
14, 15. But you can't.
okay.
But you can't have pictures. So you can
Right.
you can have consensual sex, but you're not allowed to have any pictures of it or of the person who is of
Well, this
that
is a-
age. Which is kind of a strange legal situation in my view.
It is definitely. And of course, the youth in question has come out and said it's been misinterpreted. So all three have lawyered up in different ways.
Yeah.
Like the parents have their lawyer, and the youth has a lawyer, and of course, the BBC has their lawyer in different ways. I think I said CBC earlier. I meant BBC.
Yeah, I had taken note of the story, but because of the strange legal situation there, I wasn't really sure how to handle it or deal with it. I didn't put it into the mix of stories. Plus, it's over in Britain, and I'm not sure what the circumstances really are surrounding it. I didn't put it front and center here on the program, but it is something that I did take note of. Just a strange one to me.
I guess given that this is probably the third scandal that they've been at the center of when it comes to these types of things. In Savile, I can't remember the name of the second. Yeah, it starts with an R. That was some time ago too. But some people are saying this could be the end of their privileged place in the media over there. And I'm curious to see how it plays out. It blew up. I expected it to, but then when you take it into context, being the third time that they've been in a scandal and at the heart of it, I could see this not ending well. Just public opinion wise.
It's still the BBC and it's still the government. It's still government money. Yeah, they'll survive.
Yeah, I'm sure it wouldn't bring down ours. The CBC here wouldn't fall over it, but it's just, they are hemorrhaging people. I mean, viewers, just like CBC is. So
yeah.
Anyway, I just thought it was interesting. I was surprised it got so big, and that was more the interest to me. It was, why is it, so big this time? Anyway.
Well, there you go. Well, thank you, Steve. I appreciate the call very much, as always.
Yep. All righty. Well, have a good evening, and catch up with you sometime.
Okay, thanks. All right, who do we have up next here? Let's take a look. Hello. Go ahead.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fine. Who do we have?
It's Chris calling from Alberta.
Welcome back.
I found you. Yeah, it only took 6 days to figure out where you disappeared to.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Facebook sucks.
Oh, well, I really thought it was me. I'm going, well, I don't remember posting anything or saying anything. I'm going, this is weird. And then your last post was June the 26th. I'm going, oh no, something's not right. And even when I tried to message you, you weren't getting back to me. I'm going, oh, something's just not right here at all. Yeah. So yeah, I'm glad I found you again. It's nice to be back in the group.
Yeah. So, I did a little test upload, the live thing just before we came on Facebook.
Okay.
And yeah, it does work on the one main Facebook page. But all I did was a news preview over there tonight. I'm not broadcasting on Facebook, even though I can at least on one of the pages. I'm not. Okay. I'm not doing it. I'm going to promote the show over there, and try to just direct people over to Rumble. Because
okay, fair enough.
It's still unstable. For the past 2-3 months, every single video that we do, they hit with a copyright strike, even though there's no copyright violation. I disputed one of them. It's this exact same thing every time. It's about music. And then I filed a dispute and I proved that we had the rights and that's one. And they hit every single one of them. So they were blocking every video that it goes live, but then after they would block it, and then they hit me with these violations. They banned us for 3 days, then they extended it, and then it's just a stupid mess. It's ridiculous, honestly.
Oh my goodness. It is. It is. It's, well, anyways, it's okay. I can follow you on Rumble. So
Yeah.
that's
Anyway.
good to know, because I was beginning to think, I didn't know if you just disappeared completely and stopped,
No.
you know.
No, they can't get rid of us
I thought,
that
this is
easy.
very strange.
I'm just going to
Oh,
be
I
more
know.
strategic about the way we use Facebook. We'll use Facebook, but all I'm going to do is I'm going to promote on there to get people to come over here. And I'm just not going to run anything with any music or anything that could even be remotely, connected to any kind of
Yeah.
copyright strike. And we'll just direct people over. I got a few different plans to work around that. So that's good.
Right on.
Yeah.
Anyways, so a couple of things. So, you're talking about the inflation rate tonight, right?
Yeah.
So here in Alberta, they're saying the same thing, that the inflation's coming down, but unemployment is skyrocketing out here.
Yep.
And it's silly because there's so many more people have moved out here, get jobs, and yet there's so many people out of work. Like, just on a daily basis, just in the town that I live in, I can't believe the amount of people that don't work. It's just like, it's just, it blows my mind. So, I mean, I don't know really what's going on. I mean, I believe the inflation is still a lot higher than that.
It is. And
For sure.
you can combat inflation by putting a whole bunch of people out of work. What you're doing is you're triggering a recession or maybe even a depression. And when you're in that situation, you absolutely get a decline in economic activity and a drop in prices because nobody can afford to buy anything anymore. See, it's all supply and demand. If you decrease demand by putting everybody out of work, then people can't afford to buy anything, so prices come down. Or you could do what I suggested and increase supply by increasing productivity, keeping everybody working, but having everybody be so productive that everybody becomes more affluent, everybody prospers, and prices come down because there's an abundance of things. But no, they'd rather just put everybody out of work.
Well, I mean, he's definitely destroying Canada. There's no doubt about that. It's not getting any better. And one thing I wanted to ask you about, and I mean, if you don't know, I mean, just let me know and I can talk to you privately. But have you heard of this law that Trudeau's trying to pass? It's got to do with that Pastor Art. You know how he goes to court on August the 9th, right? How he was feeding the homeless and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I'm hearing news reports out here. Well, not so much news reports, but I'm hearing a lot of chatter, I'll put it that way, out here, of a law that Trudeau wants to get put into effect even before Parliament comes back in, to a law that nobody is going to be allowed to feed the homeless. All these mustard seeds and all these homeless places won't be able to feed them. He wants to close all food banks to people. And I don't know I don't know really what they're talking about. So I just wondered if you've heard of anything that he's up to that sounds along this line.
Not Trudeau. These are laws.
Yeah, that's what
these are laws that are generally passed by municipalities, and they're designed to prevent loitering, people from setting up tents or tent cities. See, they'll say you're not allowed to feed the homeless. So in Calgary, I think they already have a bylaw like that, which is directly related to what Arthur Pavlovsky was involved with, where they're saying you can't feed the homeless people. So the argument is they don't want you to give panhandlers handouts, no money, don't feed them. They just want those people to move along. If you feed them, you encourage the loitering, and then they'll hang out in front of people's businesses, and the business owners want them gone. And so that's what those bylaws are aimed at. But they can be viewed as pretty cruel, right? And rightly so.
And I mean,
but no, federally, there's.
Well, I can't see how he could do that. I mean, I can't see that would even get passed. I mean, saying you're going to fine somebody if you feed the homeless, like, I mean, my God, like, I mean, has the country become that crazy that we can't look after our people anymore?
There are bylaws in place right now in some cities where they have that in effect. And we talked about it here the one night. I'm pretty sure it was Calgary. There are some others as well that have laws like that. But you know, the municipalities generally that have those kinds of laws in place, they'll say that, no, but it's okay because we have this program over here to help people. But those programs don't always work, because a lot of those people that are sitting there, you know, and they're asking for handouts, a lot of those people have mental illness issues, and they don't know how, or they choose not to participate in those other support programs. So it's a big problem for them because they fall through the cracks. And if you just move them along, you know what happens to a lot of them is they end up dying.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the trouble. If they're either going to starve to death if no one helps them, or the drugs are going to take them out, which is a huge problem, as you know. I mean, it's just it's really sad in a way. And I just wanted to update you on I guess next Saturday there's a big thing happening in Calgary to do with Save the Children.
Oh, is there? Okay.
But I'd have to go back and look at the poster. I saw it on one of the pages. Yeah, and it's supposed to be at Princess Park on next Saturday. But there's a big name speaker there, but sorry, I don't have it in front of me.
Well, we can find
if I figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm actually glad you brought up this
I
homeless thing, because you know it's timely, because we might, and I'm not sure yet, but I'm looking at doing some special reports and maybe a full documentary on the homeless issue.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so I was talking to some of our Mavericks about that just within the last day. And
okay.
If we're going to proceed with that, I'll let you know probably tomorrow or the next day. As I talk to folks about that. So we're looking at doing a special project on that very issue.
And I think that's actually probably a really good thing to address, because I think it's really something that does need to be addressed. Yeah. Honestly, I do. I feel like these people are going through the cracks, and then they're turning to the drugs, and it's so tragic. It doesn't have to happen. This doesn't have to happen.
I just did some video work for a charity that deals directly with the homeless here in my town. So it's kind of piqued my interest in it. They're a faith-based group, and they provide a variety of different supports and programs for people who are homeless in our community. So I was doing some work with them, and yeah, I've taken note of it. And, you know, like in my town, there are people, and I don't live in a very big city, only about 50,000 in the municipality proper here. And for the first time, we have a tent city here. Like,
really? Wow.
Some people living in tents. I'm like, it blows my mind. I've never thought that I would have seen that. And in the downtown, we have a problem with homeless people. And the merchants are upset. It's not good for them. There's violence. There's all kinds of stuff, I guess, that happens down there late at night that most people are not aware of. So I'm going to go check it out, and we'll see what we do with all of that.
Well, that's like Red Deer, which is, you know, fairly close to where I am. You don't go downtown during the day, and you don't go at night, because I mean it's getting really bad. Even the little town that I'm living in, we have a guy that lives in a trailer, and he just he parks it everywhere every other night. We have people that couch surf, or you'll see them now that the weather's nice, they're just sleeping under a bench in the park. And you know, for a small town, you wouldn't think you'd actually see that, but it's happening all over. It really is. It doesn't have any boundaries, and rural communities are getting hit the hardest because you don't have a lot of the programs to help them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and see, in my neighborhood, for the first time in the past year, I've seen homeless people on my street. And this is what most people would consider to be like a really nice, you know, middle-class suburb, right?
Right.
And, but if you go only about 5 blocks over, there's a hotel that they use as sort of a halfway house for people transitioning from jail or for the homeless people and stuff like that. So
Right.
it was only a couple of weeks ago I came out in the morning to walk the dog. It was early in the morning, and there were some homeless people sitting over there by the it's the super box mailbox thing in our neighborhood, and they were all they were sitting
Right.
over there. And I've had my cars broken into I don't know how many times,
Oh no.
just so they can rifle through and see if they can steal change or whatever happens
Yeah.
to be in the cars, right? It's just
Wow.
one of those things, but that's what's happened because we've seen such an erosion in our society and so many people having more and more problems with drugs and mental illness. Those are the main driving forces, I think.
Yeah, and like you had said, people are very close to, that $200 mark. Well, yeah, it's getting to that point where people, I mean, like you said, people eventually are going to walk away from their homes if these interest rates keep going up because they just can't. Like I know in this town alone, we've had 3 the banks have basically taken back their homes and left them out on the street.
Yep.
So yeah, it's quite an erosion problem that's happening. That's for sure. And yeah, that would be good if you could do something on it.
Yep.
Get awareness out there because I think more people need to, unless it's happening to them, kind of thing. They don't care.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people, it could be happening right in your own neighborhood if you open your eyes.
Yes.
Right.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's just I don't know what's happening. But anyways, I'll let you go. It was nice finding you again back on here.
We're here.
And I'll be watching.
Okay. Thank you, Chris.
Okay. Have a great night. Bye-bye.
You too. Take care. Okay, folks, that gets us to 8:05 p.m. And what we're going to do is wrap it up for the night, actually. 8:05 p.m. So just a reminder that you can support the show by donating at freedomreporters.com, or you can donate at maverickdonations.com. That would certainly help us out, pay for the phone lines, pay for the work we're doing. I'm pretty sure we're going to do something with that homeless stuff too. I was talking to a couple of people who might be able to contribute to that, so that would help finance that, and just keep the lights on here in general. Let me just pull these phone numbers down off this thing. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. Oh yeah, there's that right there, maverickdonations.com. So you can donate there, or also at freedomreporters.com. And we certainly appreciate the support we've had from all you guys in the past. As you know, we are entirely supported by you, and we are here to give you a voice. This is your channel as much as it is anybody else's. So this is where you can exercise your right to free speech by engaging in the conversation. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here on the Maverick News channel again tonight. I will be back tomorrow evening, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the flip side. I need to find the closer. Where did you go? Oh, I found it. See you tomorrow.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.